thank you for coming. But here, thank you for having me. My name is Dharma Joy. As Joe has said very kindly, I am currently serving as the abbot and the head priest at ZCLA. And I don't know how many of you know about ZCLA, but so Zen Center of Los Angeles was founded in 1967 by Mayuzumi Roshi. So Mayuzumi Roshi came from a family in Japan that was quite involved in the Soto school. He was there were 7 brothers, so his poor mother. No sisters, just 7 brothers, of whom 5 became priests. And Mayuzumi Roshi it's very interesting because normally in Japan, you grow up, it's kind of Zen is like the family business, that's what it's become. So you grow up, you get sent to school, you get sent to the monastery, you receive Dharma transmission from your father, and then you basically run the family temple. If you're the second son or the third son, you may go run some other temple. But that's kind of the style. Mayuzumi Roshi, to the great credit of his father wanted his sons to have a more ecumenical training than that. So for Mayuzumi Roshi, when he was in high school, his father sent him to live in Tokyo with a Rinzai teacher. So Mayuzumi Roshi's family is from the Soto school. As you may know, there are 2 big schools of Zen training left. There were originally 5 or so. But, and there's the Soto school and the Rinzai school, and they have, rivalries and distinctions. It's all practice, but we all, it's like we might be aware of in the United States. We are all Americans, but we still manage to fight with each other. So anyway, Mayuzumi Roshi's father sent him to study while he was in high school with a Rinzai teacher. And then after he had finished his schooling, went to university, went to the monastery, and then when he was 25 years old, he came to the United States to be a priest at Zenchuji Temple in Little Tokyo in Los Angeles. And Zenchuji was basically the American missionary outpost for Zen, Soto Zen in America. And it had a big Japanese-American community, and he was basically a priest for the Japanese-American community. But he was unhappy with the amount of zazen or meditation that was going on. It was largely kind of a cultural center, rather than something that he was really focused on the training. So in the 60s, a bunch of these hippies, found him, the first being Bernie Glassman. And they eventually persuaded him to leave Zenchuji and to found ZCLA. So he left his role as a temple priest for the Japanese American community and helped found the Zen Center of Los Angeles, which was largely aimed at kind of the Anglo community. This was, the hippie period. The writings of Alan Watts and D.T. Suzuki had influenced a lot of people. So there was a big, there's a lot of activity, a lot of interest. So ZCLA was founded in 1967. We moved to our current location. The first building was purchased in, I think it was 1968. Over the course of time, we acquired additional buildings in the area. At one point, ZCLA owned an entire city block, plus had a lot of the adjacent buildings that were being rented by students. There were 50 priests and 100 residents at one time. And now it's much, much smaller. The fad has moved on. Various scandals have rocked the community and reduced the numbers. But we're still there. And Mayuzumi Roshi, whose I know picture is in the Dokusan room or the Daisan room, his influence remains. So after he came to the United States, he continued his studies with that Rinzai teacher. and then also with a teacher by the name of Yasutani Roshi. Yasutani Roshi, for those of you who are readers, which can be a good thing or a bad thing, Yasutani Roshi figures prominently in Kapleau's 3 Pillars of Zen. So Maezumi Roshi ended up receiving Dharma transmission from Koryo Roshi, who was the Rinzai teacher, and from Yasutani Roshi, as well as from his father. So there are 3 different sort of streams of training that all ended up with Maezumi Roshi. And so that really filters down to us today, and it filters down to you today. Because, for example, at what we'll call a traditional Soto temple, we don't have anything like koan practice. You may have koans in talks like this, but you don't have the sort of the intensive koan study that we have here. That was completely a function of Maezumi Roshi's training with Yasutani Roshi and Koryu Roshi. So there are a lot of different things. So when people come to ZCLA from Japan, we're kind of like, we're neither fish nor fowl, right? So the Soto people come in and they look at what we do and they're like, oh, not Soto. And then the Rinzai people come in and they're like, that's not Rinzai. So, we're just making our own way. And as Choa said, Sweetwater is Seisen studied with Maezumi Roshi. She studied in ZCLA. She took those forms, and so they're manifesting here. So everything that we have is, we're really kind of making this entirely kind of hybrid style. It creates, for those of us who are in administrative positions, huge headaches, but it's who we are. And, we are really enriched by this availability of both the aspect of shikantaza, just sitting, which is the hallmark of Dogen Zenji in the Soto school, and then also of the richness of koan study, which is really about just aliveness, right? A lot of the Rinzai teachers, the Soto practice of shikantaza goes back to a form that's called silent illumination. And it was very popular within this practice of silent illumination was very popular. There's a period basically right before Zen jumped to Japan, where there was this huge kind of like debate going on between the proponents of silent illumination and the proponents of koan study. And it's really kind of an amazing, it's like, this is kind of the formation of the real concretization of the 2 schools. Before that, everybody was just doing everything. It was like here in the United States, it was like lots of experimentation, lots of like fluidity. And then over time, things start to get, we might say sclerotic even. And then you need to mix it up. So I want to tell you about a dream I had first, because I almost forgot. So I've been really thinking about what to say here for this talk, and I've been debating in my mind a whole bunch of different things. But on Friday night, I actually had a dream about this, and I had a dream that Choa came to me and he said, "We're so happy that you're giving the talk, but somehow or other there became this system where in order to give a talk, you had to make a contribution." And all I remember about this dream is that
this is not a dream.
Choa and the little piece of paper he gave me, which told me that the contribution they were asking for was $2,500. So I have my checkbook here. And so I don't know where that came from. It was really quite amazing. But I did, so last time I was here, I gave a talk that was jumping off from a koan, which is really about why do we practice. So today I decided I want to talk about a little bit about how do we practice. And I've brought some show and tell with me. Very exciting. I'm sorry for those of you on Zoom, but I'll hold it up. So what I brought is I've borrowed at the front, at the entrance to the Zendo at Zen Center of Los Angeles, there is this piece of wood. It's a piece of redwood. This is it here. I hope they didn't notice that it's missing. I mean, it's small, so why would they notice that? And so we can pass it around, or you can look at it later. So what this is it is called the Los Angeles Zendo Precautions. And it was carved in this piece of redwood by Maezumi Roshi in about 1967. And it's, I only found out, so it's just about one page, which I'll read and maybe make some comments on. But what it turns out is it's Maezumi Roshi's modern adaptation of a short, I guess we call them fascicles, whatever that means, a short fascicle written by Dogen Zenji in the year 1239, when he was 39 years old, and he had just established a monastery in Japan. And it was guidelines for how to practice in the Zendo of that monastery. And so Maezumi Roshi took them and he kind of updated them for American culture. But they really are a good guideline for sort of how we practice together. And so I thought I'd like to share them. Some of them are quite amusing, and I will occasionally refer to Dogen Zenji's originals because you can see sort of some cultural adjustments that were done. It starts, this is my favorite part. Those who wish to realize and actualize the Buddha's way are welcome. Otherwise, you better keep out. So those who wish to realize and actualize the Buddha's way are welcome. So this Buddha's way, realize and actualize the Buddha's way, this is the core of the training. So for Maezumi Roshi, this is his languaging of it, to realize and actualize the Buddha way. Bernie Roshi Bernie Glassman, who was our second abbot, and many of you know is really kind of one of the most influential figures in socially engaged Buddhism in America. So Bernie relanguaged it, but Bernie always said this was his essential vow, to realize and actualize the oneness of life. And so that was everything that Bernie did was about manifesting this, was actualizing the oneness of life, seeing and actualizing the interconnection of all beings. And for Bernie in particular, that was an emphasis on seeing the unseen, noticing the people who are not noticed, living in the cracks of society. That was really Bernie's incredible energy was about getting out of the Zendo and into the streets. Now, Bernie could do that because he had been in the Zendo. A saying, it's one of the great jazz masters, and I can't remember which one. I've seen this and I've never been able to find it again. But he said, in order to play outside the box, first you have to play in the box, right? So Bernie, for the entire time, Bernie was Maezumi Roshi's first Dharma successor. And while Maezumi Roshi was alive, he was the very dutiful successor. And so he learned all the forms, he helped with all the translations, he went to Japan, he had he was just really involved with all of that. And he had his head shaved and the whole thing. And then after Maezumi Roshi died, he had this space to kind of create his own way. And his own way was about basically upending all of these traditional forms in service of realizing and actualizing the oneness of life. And it's important to understand that, sure, what we need to do, what we have this yurt, the Zendo for, sitting Zazen is not the goal in itself. Sitting Zazen is helping us to sort of create an equilibrium that we then bring into the world. Right? There's a famous old story about a guy who goes to the monastery and he's just sitting, facing the wall, sitting all day. And then finally the abbot comes over with his stick and he hits him. And he says, "We have enough stone Buddhas. We don't need any more." Right? And so that's, we do the work in the Zendo so that we can then take ourselves outside into the world to realize and actualize the oneness of life. So for Maezumi Roshi, he says, to realize and actualize the Buddha's way, you're welcome. Otherwise, you better keep out. And Dogen Zenji goes through a lot more on that and says basically things like, well, if they're admitted in error, they should be thrown out and yada, yada, yada. Then he says, let us be harmonious, like milk dissolved in water. Temporarily, there are the relationships of guests to master and juniors to seniors. However, eventually, all of us will be Buddhas forever. We should maintain the Buddha mind moment after moment. So this is also very important. So on the one hand, we really understand, in Zen practice, there's this emphasis on the oneness, on emptiness, on, we'll say, enlightenment. But that's only one half of the story. People can get stuck there. That's what we call Zen sickness, right? Here we have to, on the one hand, we see the equality. We're all sitting, we're all facing one another. There's no one here on a podium. We're all practicing together. And there are teacher and student. There's master and disciple, whatever the language is. Because there is something, on the one hand, we see the equality, and we also see the difference. We see the circumstance where we can learn something, and we see that we are all teachers of one another. So both are true. And the thing that's so important in this practice is developing the facility to shift, to be fluid, to not get rigid, to not get stuck. And so we can move from the line of let us be harmonious like milk dissolved in water to the line of temporarily there are the relationships of guests to masters and juniors to seniors. And then it affirms, however, eventually all of us will be Buddhas forever. It goes on, let us not waste time. Time flies swiftly and nothing is dependable. Reflect upon the transiency of our lives. So this, at least at ZCLA, every evening we have this thing called the evening gata, and we say, I respectfully remind you, time, life and death are of supreme importance. Time swiftly passes by and opportunity is lost. Each of us should strive to awaken, take heed, do not squander your life. So this is the, as we say, practicing as though your head is on fire, right? Don't be lax. It's very easy, we're sitting here, no one's auditing our brains while we're sitting. You could be sitting thinking about, planning your next vacation, or you can be sitting. Sitting in this posture is not zazen. The posture is not zazen. The practice of what's going on in your mind is zazen. So that when you get up, you have zazen in the zendo, you have zazen in the car, you have zazen at home with your wife, with your dog, with your children, standing in line at the grocery store. Zazen mind is right there. Or it can be thinking about the fight you had. So no one's going to be, there's no little lights. It's not like when you go to those garages, the parking structures, it has the little red light or the green light over whether the spot's available or not. There isn't something like that over each, zabuton saying, oh, they're really, they're on track. Right? We're responsible for our own lives. We're responsible for our own conduct. And these lives are short. The older you get, the more you realize that. Do not blame or criticize others. Do not imitate the falsehood of others, but nourish your own virtue. Correct errors and do not hate them. So this is very important in terms of how we practice together, right? So when we are doing precept study, we say, in our precept study, we say, I will make my best effort and accept the results. I won't elevate myself and blame others. I won't talk about the others' errors and faults. It doesn't mean when we say I'm not going to talk about others' errors and faults that we're not going to correct them. But the question is, there's a difference between a correction and a criticism. How do we act in a way that affirms life? This is the most important thing of all precept practice, right? The touchstone of precept practice is affirm life. So how do we work with each other? How do we interact with each other in the Zendo, outside the Zendo, to affirm life, to have that life-affirming energy? So, we've all probably had it, this kind of correction versus the correction that makes you feel supported. If you haven't, you will. It's, we're all human beings. So we also understand that. So we correct errors and do not hate them. So when we see errors, if we hate them, so that's a really interesting, it's a great opportunity for our own practice. If we're getting riled by something, the investigation is, oh, what is it in me that's getting riled? So when I was in study for Denkai, the precept empowerment transmission, at one point, Gyoku Roshi, who's was the abbot of ZCLA at the time, my teacher, she said to the three of us who were in the study group, she said, if someone's really pissing you off in the Sangha, you have to see what's wrong with you. I did not like that at all. At all. Like, wrong with me? No. That's not how this is working. Something's wrong with them. But, if someone's agitating you, it's agitating me. So it's like when we see these things, if someone's errors sort of rile me up, it's the investigation is internal. And then the question is, and how do I relate to that person? Again, from the touchstone of affirming life. I mean, it's just an error. Pertaining to the Zendo, necessary matters will be discussed with the master. When the decorum of the guest and master relationship gets out of order, absolute and relative functions will not be actualized. Well, that's really beautiful, I think. But, for the small self-ego, it's really hard. Like the whole practice of working with a teacher, whether it's just being trained here, going in for Daisan, if you're doing koan study or whatever, there's the ego just can block us from the intimacy of just showing up open and aware. That's the most important thing, in my view, of what goes on when you're going in for Daisan. So Daisan is basically being seen by another person. Like, we spend a lot of our lives, speaking personally, maybe your results may vary, but maybe not. We spend an awful lot of our lives just avoiding ourselves. We don't even want to see ourselves, much less have someone else see us. this whole practice of like facing the wall or facing yourself, whatever direction you're pointed, it's incredibly threatening for a lot of people. When I do the introductory class, I used to say, oh, well, this is, we're facing ourselves. And some people are like, oh, that's so cool. And I'm like, well, let's see, let's see. And then we go into Daisen, and the Daisen is only effective if you can show up intimately. Stop playing the games. Stop using the techniques to divert, to distract, to separate. And I strongly recommend, it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're doing koan study, you're doing shikantaza, just go in and see a teacher in Daisen. Go see Choa, whoever's available. Not for any substantive benefit, although those can be good, but for the opportunity to work with our own conditioning and to have the opportunity to drop it and to see it so that you can see it. You can't drop it until you see it. So for me at ZCLA, that first building, the one we bought in 1968, it was a dentist office. So it's this old it's an old house, and one side of it, there's what literally was a dentist office with these 3 rooms that were like dental office rooms. Now I'm told that when they renovated it and took out all the carpet and whatever, when they first did the renovations, they found all these teeth like in the cracks in the floor and things like that. But now there's this little hallway and it opens into the Daisen rooms. And for every day that I went down in face-to-face to see my teacher, for years, I would just have this like existential dread as I was going down that hallway. Because I'm going to go expose myself to another person, and that it can be so scary. And that's why we do it. Because it's the opportunity to just be seen. And that's so rare. I mean, to be seen truly by another person is such a gift. And it's terrifying. And, I'm judging, she's just there. She's just open. I'm the one who's judging the hell out of myself on the way down that hallway. I don't know my koan. I'm not prepared. She's going to think I'm an idiot. I'm wasting her time. I'm the worst Zen student ever. So one of my friends at Zen Center, she tells a story about how she really was sure she was the worst Zen student. She's very hard on herself. She went in to see Mayazumi Roshi once, and she was just telling him, she says, Mayazumi Roshi, I'm just the worst. I'm just the worst Zen student. I just don't understand anything. I just don't. And he interrupts her. He says, you are so arrogant. What was that? I don't understand what you said. He says, you are so arrogant. She says, no, I don't think you understood what I was saying. I'm talking about how terrible I am. He says, arrogant, all about you. And it just like floored her, But anyway, I'd go down and that would be the style. I'm like, judging myself. And that's why we do it over and over, to desensitize ourselves, to allow ourselves to see what we're doing with ourselves, and to be like, it's okay. We've done this 500 times now. We've survived. It's okay. Just chill out, and then be able to just show up. And sometimes, of course, in the early koans, if you're doing the Dharmakaya koans, the Dharmakaya koans ask us to basically embody something. Right? It's all about embodiment, getting out of our heads, this rational mind, and into the body. And when we do that, we're going to like basically look ridiculous. And that's the point, that we can do it in front of another person and completely commit to it. And maybe at some point it becomes really fun. No talking is allowed in the Zendo. Well, as Shoyu was saying, what noble silence. No strong scent, such as perfume, is allowed. Now, in the original, he says, "Don't come into the zendo smelling of onions and scallions." So that's been updated to no strong perfume. Do not walk in the zendo with your hands at your side. Be at home and be comfortable. Let us be respectful to ourselves and others, as well as to the Buddha. The next line, Maizumi Roshi said this all the time. Our zazen is the zazen of the Buddhas. Transcending both enlightenment and delusion, let us be aware of this very fact. Let us be selfless and be ourselves and accomplish the four great vows together. Maha Prajna Paramita Taizan Hakuyu Gasho. So he inscribed this on this piece of redwood, which now hangs in the entryway of the zendo. We can pass it around if you want to see it. So Shoyu, can you? It's a little bit heavy. If you break it, you're going straight to hell. Sorry, I can get out of this. I'm told, I don't know if this is a true story, an apocryphal story, that at some point, someone found it in the dumpster. And then they recovered it. I don't know if it's a true story, but it's a good story, one way or the other. So this is really these are guidelines. He calls it the precautions, but these are guidelines to how we practice together and how we practice on our own within this container of the Zendo, and how we truly then realize and actualize the Buddha's way. So I'm going to end with that and leave room for questions. Hopefully you have questions. Every time I come here, I'm so impressed by the number of questions that the Sangha has. It's really fantastic. At ZCLA, I've been scolding the Sangha because I come down here and there are all these questions, and I've been listening to some other talks. Tension, maybe it's the Mountain Center influence. At Mountain Center, they have like a huge number of questions. And like at ZCLA, no one has questions. I'm like, you should be ashamed of yourself. I don't say that, but I just think it. But I'm like, oh, other places I've gone, they have a lot of questions. So maybe we should inquire in ourselves, like, what is it? Why is it that we're afraid to ask questions? But that's not a problem here, so I will shut up and listen to all of you.
No pressure.
No pressure, right?